8 years. For 8 long years, Elara hadn't uttered a single word. Not when they beat her. Not when the pack children mocked her for being the cursed mute. Not even when her only friend was dragged away for speaking in her defense. Silence had become her shield, her only protection in a world that punished difference. Swept the floors of the Moonridge pack house, as she always did, head bowed, her auburn hair veiling her face. Her rough hands moved automatically, gathering dust, straightening chairs, avoiding eyes. To them, she was no one, the quiet orphan girl who couldn't speak. And that was exactly what she wanted them to believe, because if anyone ever heard her voice, if anyone discovered the truth, the king would come for her. It had been 8 years since the prophecy spread across the realms, the one foretelling a woman whose voice could calm the Lycan King's beast. A voice that could end wars and tame darkness. The girl with the voice of light. Elara had been 13 when she realized that the prophecy was about her. The night her song accidentally healed her alpha's wounds in front of the pack, panic had set in. She had run deep into the forest and bitten her tongue until it bled, vowing never to speak again. And for 8 years, she'd kept that vow. The pack house buzzed with tension that morning. Elara could feel it even through her usual fog of silence. Servants rushed everywhere, scrubbing, polishing, hanging banners of silver and black. "The king arrives at noon," someone shouted. "Everything must be perfect." Elara froze, her heart lurching. The king. Her breath caught. No one had told her he was coming. By midday, the great hall gleamed under the light of 1,000 candles. The air was heavy with nervous anticipation. Alphas and betas from nearby packs had gathered, whispering among themselves about the infamous Lycan King, the ruler of all werewolves, feared and worshipped alike. Elara tried to make herself smaller, kneeling by the far end of the hall, polishing the marble floor. Then the doors opened, and silence rippled through the room, the kind of silence that was alive, thick and dangerous. He entered, the Lycan King, tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in black that shimmered faintly like smoke. His golden eyes scanned the hall, sharp and commanding. Every wolf lowered their head. The air crackled with power, ancient, ruthless, and wild. Elara felt it too. The energy clawed at her skin, making her wolf stir restlessly for the first time in years. Her hands trembled around the rag she held. His gaze passed over her once, sharp, assessing, and then moved on. She exhaled shakily. He didn't recognize her. He couldn't, not after all these years, not after she had hidden so well. But that night, fate betrayed her. After the ceremony and feasting, Elara was sent to the kitchens to deliver wine to the king's private chambers. She hesitated at his door, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. When she entered, he was alone, seated by the fire, his wolf aura coiling like smoke around him. "Set it there," he said without looking at her. His voice was deep, smooth, yet it carried a weight that pressed against her chest. She obeyed, keeping her head low, every instinct screaming for her to run. Then, as she turned to leave, her foot caught the edge of the rug. The tray slipped, the goblet crashed, and crimson wine spilled across the floor. Elara dropped to her knees, trembling, scrambling to clean it. He stood. She could feel his shadow fall over her, immense and cold. "Look at me." She didn't move. I said, "Look at me." Something primal in his tone made her obey. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Golden eyes met green, and something snapped. The world tilted. His nostrils flared. His pupils blew wide. The air thickened, his aura flaring like wildfire. "What are you?" he growled, stepping closer, his voice lower now, almost dangerous. "You're sent. Why does it call to me?" Elara's lips parted soundlessly. She shook her head, pleading silently. "Speak," he ordered. Her throat tightened. She hadn't spoken in 8 years. If she did now, everything would end. "Say something." He roared, his wolf surfacing, voice echoing through the chamber. Tears welled in her eyes as she backed away, shaking her head desperately. But then, he grabbed her wrist. The heat of his skin burned through her fear. "Tell me your name," he demanded. And before she could stop herself, the smallest whisper escaped her lips. Broken, trembling, barely there. "Elara!" The sound filled the air like a spell. The king froze. The fire behind him flickered blue. For the first time in his life, the beast inside him went silent. He stared at her, disbelief and recognition warring in his eyes. "It's you," he breathed. The voice from the prophecy. Elara's heart shattered. Her silence, her safety, was gone. The king had found her. The silence that followed her whispered name was deafening. Even the flames in the hearth seemed to hold their breath. Elara stood frozen, her lips parted, her heart hammering violently in her chest. The single word she had spoken, her name, echoed in the air like forbidden magic. The king's golden eyes flickered with something feral. Shock, recognition, desire. His wolf was clawing at the surface, desperate to get closer to her. She took a step back. He took a step forward. "You lied," he said quietly, though his voice trembled with barely contained fury. "You've been hiding from me." Elara shook her head quickly, her hands trembling. "Please," she mouthed silently, her emerald eyes wide with fear. 8 years, he continued, circling her slowly like a predator cornering its prey. 8 years I've searched for the one whose voice could soothe my beast. And all this time, you were pretending to be mute? Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to explain, to tell him that she had only been a frightened child when the prophecy was spoken, that all she'd ever wanted was to live in peace, to be invisible. But no words came. Her throat burned as if bound by invisible chains. He stopped directly in front of her. The intensity in his gaze pinned her to the spot. "Say it again," he murmured. Elara blinked, startled. "Your name," he said, softer now. "Say it again." She shook her head violently. "No." The moment the words slipped out, his wolf growled in satisfaction. The low, rumbling sound filled the chamber, vibrating through her bones. "You can speak," he whispered, his eyes blazing. "Goddess, that voice!" He reached out as if drawn by something greater than his will, his hand brushing the side of her face. His touch sent shivers racing down her skin, awakening something she had buried long ago. "Why hide it?" he demanded, though the edge in his tone softened. "Do you not know what you are?" Elara swallowed hard. Her voice came out faint, trembling. "A curse." His brows drew together. "A curse?" "That's what they called me," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "My voice brings death to those who covet it. My song healed once, and then they feared me. They said the king would come and take me, and I didn't want to be taken." He went still. For a moment, the fierce Lycan King looked almost human. "Is that what you think I would do? Take you as if you were property?" Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. He sighed, stepping back, running a hand through his dark hair. "You don't understand, little wolf. The bond that ties us isn't something either of us chose. The moon made this," he gestured between them, "long before we were born." Elara's heart thudded painfully. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're wrong. The moon doesn't choose slaves." His eyes flared gold, his wolf stirring in protest. The air grew heavier, charged with power and anger, but beneath it was something else. Longing, pain. He exhaled, forcing control back into his voice. "You're trembling," he said quietly. "Are you afraid of me?" Her silence was answer enough. He stepped closer again, his scent, wild pine and smoke, surrounding her. "I would never harm you, Elara, but understand this. Now that I've found you, I will not lose you again." Her breath hitched. "Please don't claim me." His jaw clenched. "It's not a matter of want," he said darkly. "It's destiny." She shook her head, desperate. "Destiny took everything from me once. I won't let it do it again." And before he could react, she shoved past him and bolted for the door. "Elara!" His roar shook the hall as she fled. Guards turned, startled, as she raced down the corridor, her bare feet slapping against the marble floor. "Stop her," someone shouted, but the king's voice overpowered them all. No one touches her. She ran anyway, through the gardens into the forest, until the night swallowed her. Her lungs burned, tears blurring her sight. She thought she could escape him. She thought silence and distance could save her again. But as she reached the edge of the woods, the wind shifted, and she felt it, his presence. His wolf. He was already following. The forest swallowed her whole. Branches tore at Elara's arms as she ran, her heart pounding a terrified rhythm in her chest. The moon was high, casting silver shadows that danced through the mist. Her bare feet hit the damp earth, leaving a trail even a half-blind tracker could follow. And she knew it. Still, she ran. She'd lived her life running, from whispers, from prophecies, from herself. But tonight, she was running from something far more dangerous than all those things combined. She was running from the Lycan King. Behind her, she could feel him. Not just hear, not just smell. His presence rippled through the night like a living force, heavy and magnetic. The forest seemed to bow to his will. Leaves stilled. The wind quieted. Even the wolves that howled in the distance went silent. He was close. Too close. Her wolf whimpered inside her, confused, drawn toward the sound of his heartbeat that seemed to echo in hers. "Run," she whispered hoarsely to herself. "Keep running," but even as she said it, her legs began to weaken. The cold air bit into her lungs, and the forest floor blurred beneath her. Then, a growl. Deep, commanding. It came from everywhere at once. "Enough, little wolf." She froze. Her body betrayed her, shivering at the sound of his voice. It rolled through the trees like thunder, filled with power that could not be ignored. "Don't make me chase you," the king warned, but she did. Elara darted left, diving through a thicket, ignoring the scratches and the pain. She stumbled down a slope, crashing through the underbrush until she reached the river that marked the edge of the pack's land. The cold water shimmered under the moonlight. Without thinking, she plunged in, the shock stealing her breath. The current was strong. It pulled her downstream, numbing her limbs, but she pushed forward, praying the water would mask her scent. Then, a dark shadow leapt from the trees, landing on the opposite bank with supernatural grace. Golden eyes, silver aura, pure dominance. He had found her. Elara's breath hitched as he stepped into the shallows, water rippling around his boots. The power radiating from him was suffocating. "You're not making this easy," he said softly, his voice carrying even over the roar of the river. Her teeth chattered as she stumbled back, water up to her waist. "Stay away." His eyes darkened. "I can't, please," she whispered. "You don't understand." He moved faster than she could react, crossing the river in 2 strides and catching her wrist. She gasped as the heat of his touch seared through her cold skin. "Why do you run from me?" he demanded, his voice rough, desperate. "Can't you feel it? This pull between us? The bond?" Elara shook her head, tears mingling with river water. "I never wanted this." His grip loosened slightly, pain flashing across his face. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But the moon doesn't ask what we want." She looked up at him, trembling. "Then defy it. Let me go." His wolf growled beneath his breath as if the very idea was blasphemy. "I could defy the moon," he murmured. "But not you." Her lips parted in confusion, and that was when he lifted his hand, brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. His fingers lingered where a branch had cut her skin, and a faint glow pulsed beneath his touch. The wound closed instantly. Her breath caught. "I told you," he said quietly. "Your voice may calm my beast, but you are not powerless, Elara. You were never meant to hide." His words frightened her more than his strength. Because deep inside, her wolf, the part of her she'd spent years suppressing, stirred in response to his presence. To his warmth, to his voice that seemed to know her soul. "I am not your mate," she whispered, though the words came out weak and unsure. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Then why does your pulse race when I'm near?" Her silence betrayed her. The river raged around them, but neither moved. The air between them was heavy, charged, dangerous, magnetic. Finally, he stepped back, eyes still burning gold. "You can run again if you wish," he said, voice low. "But wherever you go, my wolf will find you. Because whether you accept it or not, you are mine." He turned, the forest light glinting off his wet armor, and disappeared into the trees, leaving her shaking, breathless, and completely undone. Elara sank to her knees in the river, staring at the spot where he had stood. She had survived 8 years of silence. 8 years of hiding, but for the first time in her life, she knew. Silence would not save her anymore. Elara woke to the sound of chains. Her head throbbed. Her throat burned, and the smell of burning cedar lingered in the air. She blinked against the flickering light. Not the silver moonlight of the forest, but the golden glow of a grand chamber. The bed beneath her was soft, too soft, the sheets heavy with warmth. She sat up abruptly, panic seizing her chest. Her wrists, bound with silver cuffs, though loose enough not to bruise, gleamed faintly in the dim light. A large fire roared across the room, and before it stood the Lycan King. He wasn't armored now. His black tunic clung to his broad shoulders, his hair slightly damp, his golden eyes glowing in the firelight. He looked more man than monster. And somehow that was worse. "How long have I been here?" she whispered hoarsely. He turned, his gaze meeting hers instantly. "A day," Elara flinched. "You drugged me." "I did," he admitted calmly, walking closer, each step deliberate. "Because you would have run again. And I'm done chasing you through forests like a feral beast." Her heart pounded. "You had no right. I have every right." His voice cracked like thunder, the air trembling. "You are my fated mate, Elara. My wolf knew it the moment you spoke." Her throat tightened. "Fate is not love," she said quietly. "And I never asked for this." Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Pain. But then his jaw hardened. "You think I wanted this either?" "I am cursed, Elara. My wolf has been uncontrollable for years. Violent, bloodthirsty. I've killed those who served me faithfully because I couldn't restrain him. The moon goddess gave me one hope. A mate whose voice could calm the beast." He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "And that's you." Elara's breath caught. "So that's all I am to you? A cure?" "No." His answer came too quickly, too raw. "You are peace, the one thing my soul has not known in centuries." She turned her face away, tears stinging her eyes. "You don't even know me." "I know your silence," he murmured. "And I know how much it cost you to break it." The sincerity in his tone made her chest ache. For a long moment, neither spoke. The crackle of fire filled the air, the tension softening but not fading. Finally, she whispered, "If the prophecy is true, then my voice can both heal and destroy. You said you've killed people before. What if I'm worse? What if my voice kills you?" He approached her slowly, his power controlled, his steps careful, as though afraid to scare her again. When he reached her bedside, he knelt, golden eyes level with hers. "Then I'll die willingly," he said simply, "because I'd rather die by your voice than live without hearing it again." Elara's breath caught. The words were too much, too heavy, too beautiful, too dangerous. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to stay angry, to remember every reason she had hidden. But the way he looked at her, it broke something inside her. "Why me?" she whispered. He smiled faintly, not cruelly this time, but almost sadly. "Because the moon chose the only creature wild enough to defy me." Her pulse quickened. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but never touching. The restraint in that simple gesture made her tremble more than any command could. "You don't have to fear me," he said softly. "The cuffs are only to calm your wolf until she learns my scent." "I don't need your scent," she whispered. He tilted his head slightly. "Then why is your heart racing?" Elara's lips parted, but no sound came. He stood, breaking the moment, and turned toward the door. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll speak before the council. They'll want proof that the prophecy has been fulfilled." "Proof?" He paused at the doorway. "Your voice." The door shut behind him, leaving her in silence once more. But this silence was different. no longer her shield, but a storm waiting to break. Elara drew her knees to her chest, staring into the fire. For 8 years she had hidden her voice from the world. Now, the world and the king demanded to hear it, and deep inside, a truth whispered back at her. If her voice could truly calm his beast, then it could also set him free. The next morning came wrapped in mist and dread. Elara stood before the grand mirror in the corner of her chamber, her reflection barely recognizable. The maids had dressed her in silver and white, the royal colors of the Lycan court. The gown was delicate, flowing like mist around her, but she felt like a prisoner wearing silk. Her wrists were free now, though faint marks from the cuffs still traced her skin. She had thought of escaping again, but the fortress walls were guarded by warriors who could smell fear from miles away. And worse, she could feel him, the king. His presence was everywhere, in the air she breathed, the warmth that clung to her skin, the bond that pulsed faintly between their hearts no matter how she tried to deny it. A knock echoed against the door. "Enter," she whispered automatically, her voice small and unsteady. A guard stepped in, bowing slightly. "His Majesty awaits, my lady," her stomach twisted. "My lady," the title felt foreign, dangerous. But she followed him down the long marble corridor lined with banners of silver wolves and black moons. The scent of incense and old magic clung to the air. At the end of the hall, the great council chamber opened wide, filled with rows of powerful wolves and lycans. Their eyes followed her as she entered. Some curious, some suspicious, others hungry for weakness. At the center, on a throne carved of obsidian, sat the Lycan King. He rose when he saw her. Even dressed in dark formal armor, he radiated power, regal, untamed, magnetic. When his golden eyes met hers, her knees almost gave way. "Come here," he said softly, though his voice carried through the chamber like a command. Elara obeyed. When she reached the dais, he gestured to the gathered council. "These are the elders of the realm. They have awaited the fulfillment of the prophecy for years. Today they will see it with their own eyes." She swallowed hard, her palms damp. "You want me to sing?" His gaze softened, though his tone remained firm. "Speak, sing, whisper on whatever your heart wills. Let them hear what my wolf heard that night." Elara glanced at the elders. Some looked skeptical. Others whispered among themselves, their expressions unreadable. She turned back to him. "And if something goes wrong?" His lips curved faintly. "Then I will bear it." Her chest tightened. His words, so simple, so absolute, carried a weight that silenced every other thought. Elara took a deep breath, closing her eyes. For years her voice had been buried under fear and memory, but as the warmth of the firelight brushed her face, something stirred deep within, a call older than her pain. She opened her mouth. The sound that emerged was not a song, not exactly, more like light given form. A melody woven of sorrow and grace, rising softly before filling the vast chamber. The air shimmered. Every wolf present went still, their instincts bowing to something divine. The Lycan King's aura flared briefly, then stilled completely. His beast, for the first time in years, silent. Elara felt tears spill down her cheeks as her voice soared higher, her body trembling with the force of the power she had tried so long to hide. But then, the firelight flickered blue. The floor beneath her vibrated. A gust of wind tore through the hall. She gasped as pain shot through her chest, her song twisting, warping. The same energy that soothed the king's beast suddenly turned wild, chaotic. "Elara," the king's voice thundered through the chaos. She staggered, clutching her chest, her voice faltering. I can't stop it." The council panicked. Elders shouted. Guards reached for their blades. But the king's power surged outward in a flash of golden light, shielding her from their blades and the storm she had unleashed. "Look at me," he shouted, gripping her shoulders. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly with the same blue fire that danced in the air around them. "Breathe," he whispered, his tone softening. "Focus on me," and somehow she did. Her song shifted again, from chaos to calm. The wind died down. The light faded. Silence returned. The chamber stood in awe. When she finally stopped, she collapsed against him, weak and trembling. He caught her easily, holding her as though she were made of glass. The eldest counselor stood, voice trembling. "It's true," he said. "The girl with the voice of light lives. The prophecy is fulfilled." Murmurs rippled through the room, half reverence, half fear, but the king's gaze remained fixed on her alone. "Enough," he said coldly to the council. "You've seen what you came to see." Dismissed. One by one. They filed out, bowing deeply as they left. When the last door shut, silence fell once more. Not of fear, but of something far more intimate. Elara lifted her head weakly. "You see?" she whispered. "It's dangerous. I told you." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "What I saw was not danger," he murmured. "It was power and beauty. You were made for this, Elara, not to be silent, but to shake the world with your voice." Her lips parted in protest, but he silenced her with a look, one that said everything words couldn't. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. The more she tried to resist him, the more her soul began to remember that it already belonged to him. The palace halls were alive with whispers the next morning. Servants moved quickly, eyes down, lips pressed tight, afraid to speak the rumors that had already caught fire. The Lycan King had ordered the girl from the lower servants' quarters to be brought to him. No one knew why, but everyone knew who. Elara. She stood in the small servant chamber, hands trembling slightly as she fixed her plain gray tunic. Her hair, usually tied in a low braid, fell loose down her back. The mirror before her reflected the same girl she'd seen every day for 8 years. Quiet, invisible, harmless. But she no longer felt invisible. Since the night she'd whispered that single word, "Stop," nothing had been the same. She had seen the way the king's golden eyes widened, the way his wolf stirred violently beneath his skin. She had seen recognition, and that terrified her more than anything else. "His Majesty awaits you," said the palace guard at her door. His voice was tight, wary, as if he couldn't decide whether to pity or fear her. Elara nodded and followed him down the long corridor. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the polished stone floor. Every step echoed in her chest like a countdown. When the grand double doors opened, the scent of power hit her first, a blend of forest, smoke, and something darker. The king sat at the end of the room, broad-shouldered, dark hair falling just below his collar. His golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart pound painfully. "Leave us," he said, his voice a command that rumbled through the air. The guards bowed and disappeared, the door's ceiling shut behind her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elara kept her gaze on the floor, fingers twisting in her skirt. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly she lifted her head, her breath catching when their eyes met. His wolf was dangerously close to the surface. She could feel it in the way the air shifted around him, the heat that pulsed from his body. "You lied to everyone," he said quietly. 8 years. Pretending to be mute. Why? Elara swallowed, her throat tight. She hadn't spoken since that night, not a word. Her silence had returned like a shield. "I asked you a question." Still, she said nothing. The king rose from his throne, his steps slow but deliberate as he approached her. When he stopped just inches away, she could feel the pull, that invisible bond that had been growing stronger since the first night. "You think silence will protect you?" he murmured. "You think I can't hear what your heart is saying?" Her lips trembled. He lifted a finger to her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze again. "You're my mate, aren't you?" Her eyes widened in shock, and her heart skipped painfully. He gave a low, humorless chuckle. "You smell of fear and moonlight. I should have known the first night you whispered that word. Only my mate's voice could have stopped the beast inside me." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "No, please," she wanted to say, but the words died in her throat. "Say something," he said again. Softer this time. "Let me hear your voice." Elara shook her head desperately, taking a step back. but his hand caught her wrist, not in cruelty, but with a strange gentleness that disarmed her. "You can't hide from fate," he whispered. "Not from me." She pulled her hand free and finally spoke, her voice trembling, raw from years of silence. "I never wanted to be found." The king froze. The sound of her voice filled the room like fragile music, soft, broken, but hauntingly beautiful. His golden eyes darkened as his wolf stirred violently within him. "And yet," he said, his voice low and rough, "the moon brought you to me." The silence that followed was heavy with something unspoken. Fear, longing, destiny. When he finally turned away, his command was simple but absolute. "From now on," he said without looking back, "you will stay by my side. The court will know who you are." Elara's heart stopped. What do you mean?" He looked over his shoulder, eyes glowing faintly. "You are no longer a servant," he said. "You are my Luna." Her breath caught in her throat, the words hitting her harder than any blow could, because she knew what that meant. Her silence had protected her for 8 long years. Now it was no longer her shield. It was her curse. The palace felt colder than ever that morning. Every corridor Elara walked through was filled with murmurs that followed like ghosts. Servants stopped mid-step. Warriors paused in disbelief. Courtiers whispered behind their jeweled fans. The king chose her? The mute servant? Elara kept her head down as she followed the royal guard through the grand marble hall. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest, but her face remained calm, expressionless. Years of silence had taught her how to wear masks better than anyone. When the doors to the royal court opened, she felt hundreds of eyes pierce her all at once. The great chamber was magnificent. Silver banners lined the walls, sunlight spilling through stained glass to paint the floor in shifting colors. At the far end sat the king, draped in black and gold, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood his beta, Lord Kale, tall and sharp-eyed, his gaze fixed on her with suspicion. "Elara of Crescent Hollow," the herald announced, his voice echoing, "summoned by royal command." The whispering grew louder. Elara stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly beneath the folds of her dress. She hadn't worn a gown in years. The silk felt strange against her skin, soft, foreign, almost wrong. The king's gaze followed her every step until she reached the dais. "Your Majesty," Lord Kale spoke carefully, "forgive me, but the court is confused. This girl was a servant. Why summon her here before the council?" King Rowan's golden eyes darkened dangerously. "Because she is no longer a servant." Gasps rippled through the chamber. "She is my mate," he said simply, his voice steady, final. "And from this day forward, she will stand as Luna beside me." The room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping, nobles protesting, warriors exchanging shocked glances. "She can't even speak properly." Someone hissed, "Your Majesty, this must be a mistake." "A mute Luna?" "The Pax will laugh." Elara stood frozen, the words cutting deeper than blades. But the king's growl silenced them all. The sound was low, primal, and powerful, a reminder that beneath the crown sat not just a ruler, but a beast who bowed to no one. "You forget yourselves," he said, his voice laced with danger. "She needs no voice to command respect. Her silence holds more strength than your words ever will." The room fell silent again, heavy and cold. Elara's gaze flicked to him, confusion mingling with something she couldn't name. Gratitude, perhaps. Or fear. Then, his eyes softened slightly as he turned to her. "Do you wish to say anything, Luna?" She froze. "Luna." The word sounded foreign, almost cruel. Dozens of eyes bore into her, waiting, expecting her to fail. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to meet their gaze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she lowered her head and whispered softly, "Thank you, Your Majesty." It was just 3 words. But the room fell utterly silent. Her voice, soft, melodic, trembling, carried through the air like a forgotten melody. The sound of it made even the king go still. He had heard it once before, on the night she'd stopped his wolf's rage. Hearing it again stirred something inside him he couldn't control. Lord Cale frowned deeply. "Your Majesty, may I speak privately?" Rowan's eyes flicked to his beta. "Later." Cale's jaw tightened, but he bowed. The king turned to Elara again. "The court will adjust. In time, they will understand why the moon brought you to me." Then, without another word, he descended from his throne, offered her his hand, and led her out, leaving a stunned silence behind them. As they walked through the long corridor, she dared to glance up at him. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, barely audible. He stopped, his hand still holding hers. "Because fate doesn't ask for permission," he said quietly. "And neither do I." Her breath caught, her heart thundering painfully. "But I never wanted this," she said softly. He looked down at her, golden eyes fierce yet strangely tender. "Maybe not," he said. "But the moon did." Before she could respond, a sharp voice echoed behind them. "Your Majesty." It was Cale, his expression grave. "Forgive me, but there's been an incident in the eastern courtyard." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "What kind of incident?" Cale hesitated, glancing briefly at Elara. A body was found. One of the palace maids. Strangled. Elara froze. And then Cale added quietly. A silver ribbon was left beside her. The same kind the Luna wears. The king's wolf stirred violently beneath his skin. He stepped closer to Elara, his scent sharp. "Protective, stay with me," he said firmly. Because now, it wasn't just whispers haunting the palace. It was blood. The palace that morning was a storm of tension. Servants hurried through corridors with lowered eyes, and warriors moved in formation, guarding every exit. The once serene halls of the Moon Palace now carried the metallic scent of blood. Elara walked beside King Rowan, her bare feet almost silent against the marble. Her palms were cold, her heart thudding painfully beneath her ribs. The king's expression was unreadable, controlled, but his wolf's fury lingered just beneath the surface. They entered the eastern courtyard where the maid's body had been discovered. The morning sun couldn't soften the horror that greeted them. The young woman lay pale and still upon the stone path, a silver ribbon tied around her throat, identical to the one Elara wore the night before. Elara's knees weakened. She grasped the edge of her cloak, feeling her stomach twist. "Move back," the king ordered the guards, kneeling beside the body. His golden eyes glowed faintly as he examined the mark on the woman's neck. No claw wounds. This wasn't a wolf attack. Someone strangled her. Lord Cale stepped forward, folding his arms, and left a ribbon belonging to the Luna. "That doesn't seem like coincidence, Your Majesty." Elara's eyes widened. I didn't," she stammered softly, voice trembling. Cale's gaze was sharp. "You claim you were mute for 8 years. No one knows who you truly are or where you came from. Perhaps it's time to ask why." "Enough," Rowan growled, rising to his full height. His presence alone silenced the courtyard. "No one accuses my mate without proof." Cale bowed slightly, but did not look away. "I only seek to protect the crown, my king. The people are already whispering. If they believe the new Luna brings blood into the palace, then they'll learn to hold their tongues." Rowan snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. Elara stepped back, her breath shaky. The king's protectiveness should have comforted her, but instead, it made her chest ache. Every time he spoke for her, every time his authority shielded her, she felt the walls closing tighter around her silence. "Who found her?" Rowan asked finally. A guard stepped forward. "One of the kitchen maids, Your Majesty. She said she saw someone near the courtyard last night, a woman in a gray cloak." All eyes turned to Elara. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Gray. The servants' cloaks were gray. Hers had been taken from her chamber that morning. She hadn't even noticed until now. "I was in my room," she whispered. "I never left," Cale frowned. "Can anyone confirm that?" She shook her head helplessly. "No one." The tension in the air thickened. Rowan exhaled slowly, then turned toward his guards. "Search every chamber. Find that cloak. If it was stolen, I want to know by whom." The guards bowed and left. Kale's voice dropped low. "With respect, my king, we can't ignore the risk." She appeared out of nowhere after years of silence. We know nothing of her past, or what she's capable of. Rowan turned sharply, his wolf flashing behind his eyes. "You forget yourself, Kael. She is mine." Elara flinched at the word. Mine. It echoed like a brand. Kael bowed stiffly and stepped back, though his gaze remained full of doubt. Rowan turned back to Elara, his voice softer now. "You're shaking," she looked away. "Everyone's looking at me like I'm a monster." "You're not," he said firmly. "Someone wants you to look guilty, but I won't let them." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The weight of his words, his closeness, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, it all made her forget how to breathe. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much when you barely know me?" He hesitated. "Because I can't stop hearing your voice." Her eyes met his, startled, uncertain. But before she could respond, one of the guards came rushing back, pale and breathless. "Your Majesty." "What is it?" Rowan demanded. The guard hesitated, glancing at Elara before answering. "We found the cloak. And something else." He held out a small silver pendant. It was carved with the crest of the Bloodfang clan, enemies of the crown, banished years ago for treason. Rowan's eyes darkened. "The Bloodfangs?" Kale's tone was grim. "If they're back in the kingdom, this murder may be more than a message. It's a warning." Elara's pulse quickened. "What do they want?" Kale's gaze landed on her. "If I were to guess," he said slowly. "You." Rowan's wolf roared inside him at those words. His power surged through the courtyard, sending tremors through the ground. "Over my dead body," he growled. But Elara's fear wasn't of the assassins. It was of the truth, because deep inside, she remembered a night long ago. A burning village, screams, and a mark just like that pendant burned into the earth. She had seen it before. And now, she realized she might not have been hiding from the king at all. She had been hiding from them. Elara didn't sleep that night. The walls of her chamber felt too close, the air too heavy. The scent of smoke, a memory from long ago, seemed to linger no matter how many times she tried to convince herself it wasn't real. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing: fire, claws, and blood painting the moon crimson. The Bloodfang pendant had brought it all back. She sat by the window, watching the moon climb higher above the palace gardens. The silver light washed over her face, soft and cold, and for a moment she wasn't in the king's palace anymore. She was 8 years younger, standing in the ashes of her home. It had been the Harvest Moon Festival. Laughter, music, and the scent of roasted bread filled the village square. Her mother's hand had been warm in hers, her father's deep laugh echoing above the crowd. And then, the screams. Shadows poured from the forest, cloaked in black and marked with red, the symbol of the Bloodfang clan. They were wolves who'd turned rogue, slaughtering their own kin for power. "Run, Elara," her mother had shouted, shoving her toward the trees. But Elara didn't move fast enough. A warrior's claws caught her arm, slashing deep before her father tackled him to the ground. Elara remembered the terror, the heat of the flames, the sound of her mother's voice, and then a sharp blow to the head. When she woke, the village was gone. Everything she'd known had burned to dust. Her parents were dead. Her pack, destroyed, and beside the ruins carved into the earth was the same sigil she saw today, the Bloodfang crest. That night, something inside her broke. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stopped speaking. A knock at the door snapped her back to the present. "Elara?" The king's voice, low and uncertain. She hesitated. "Come in." Rowan entered, his dark tunic loose around his shoulders, his hair slightly damp as if he'd just bathed. He looked less like a king and more like a man burdened by ghosts. "You haven't slept," he said quietly. "Neither have you," she murmured. He studied her for a long moment before crossing the room. I saw the way you looked at that pendant, he said. You recognized it. She turned her face away. I've seen it before. Where? Her fingers tightened on the edge of her chair. My village. When I was a child, they came during the harvest moon. Killed everyone. Her voice cracked, trembling with emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. I thought they were gone. Rowan's jaw clenched. They were supposed to be. I destroyed their stronghold myself years ago. Then someone survived, she whispered. Silence settled between them, heavy, raw, filled with the weight of shared grief. Is that why you hid your voice? He asked finally. She hesitated, then nodded. They hunted survivors. Anyone who might have known what they did. My voice, it's rare. People remember it. If they heard it again, they'd know who I was. So I stopped speaking. His expression softened, the fury in his eyes fading into something else. Sorrow. You were just a child, he said. You shouldn't have had to carry that alone. I didn't have a choice. He stepped closer, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. You do now, her breath caught. What do you mean? I'll find who did this, he said, voice low but steady. And I'll make sure they never touch you again. His words burned through the fear inside her. Fierce, certain, impossible to doubt. Yet for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted his protection. Because she knew what vengeance did to men. It made them cruel. It made them monsters. And she didn't want him to become one. I don't want more blood, Rowan, she whispered. I just want peace. He looked at her for a long moment, then reached out, his hand brushing her cheek gently. Then we'll start there. But even as he said it, the wind outside howled, a low, distant sound that sent a chill through her bones. Something was coming. Something worse than the Bloodfang clan. And for the first time in 8 years, Elara spoke a prayer under her breath, not for herself, but for the king, the man fated to stand beside her, the one who would bleed because of her silence. Dawn broke cold and gray over the Moon Palace. The storm that had gathered through the night had not rained, but it had left the world heavy, the air thick, the silence uneasy. Elara stood by her window again, watching the horizon fade from black to silver. She hadn't slept. The conversation with the king echoed through her mind like a haunting refrain. You do now. Then we'll start there. Peace. But how could there be peace when death and whispers followed her every step? A soft knock came at her door. Luna? It was Mira, one of the younger maids who had been assigned to serve her since her public revelation. She was barely 16, wide-eyed and nervous. His Majesty requests your presence in the council chamber, Mira said. Elara's stomach tightened. Now? Yes, my lady. The council is gathered. Elara dressed quickly, choosing a modest gray-blue gown, simple enough not to draw attention, but fine enough to befit the Luna title she still felt she didn't deserve. Her fingers shook slightly as she adjusted the silver ribbon in her hair, the same color as the one left on the dead maid's throat. When she arrived outside the Grand Council chamber, the guards bowed stiffly. Inside, she could already hear raised voices. The people will not accept a servant as Luna, one of the councilmen was saying. She's not even one of us, another hissed. No lineage, no alliances. We know nothing of her bloodline. And then Rowan's voice cut through them all, sharp and commanding. Enough. Elara froze at the doorway, her hand on the frame. Through the narrow opening, she could see the king seated at the head of the council table, his posture rigid, his golden eyes like fire. She is my mate, Rowan said evenly. The moon chose her, and that is all the proof I need. With respect, your majesty, said Lord Kale, his tone calm but dangerous. Your instincts are clouded. The Bloodfang pendant was found in her cloak. The maid is dead, and the people are afraid. If you defend her blindly, you'll turn allies into enemies. The council murmured in agreement. Rowan's hands clenched against the armrests of his chair. I would rather stand against 1,000 enemies than doubt my own mate. His words sent a tremor through Elara's chest. But then she noticed something, Kale's expression. It wasn't anger. It was fear. And that fear wasn't directed at Rowan. It was something deeper, heavier. Before she could move, a faint movement caught her eye. A cloaked figure slipping through a side corridor, silent as a shadow. None of the guards noticed. Curiosity, or perhaps instinct, made her step away from the council doors and follow. The figure turned down a narrow hallway leading toward the archives, the oldest part of the palace, where ancient records were kept. Elara kept her distance, pressing close to the wall. She heard two voices. One was male, cold and commanding. The other, a whisper she couldn't place. "Is it done?" the cold voice asked. "Yes, my lord. The seal will be broken before the next full moon." "And the king? He'll be too busy protecting his little Luna to notice." Elara's pulse quickened. "Seal? Next full moon?" Then the first voice spoke again, colder than before. She must not remember who she is until it's too late. The silence spell is breaking. If she speaks her true name, the curse will shatter. Her breath caught in her throat. The silence spell. A loose tile creaked beneath her foot. The voices stopped instantly. "Who's there?" Elara turned to run, her heartbeat hammering, but the cloaked figure moved with impossible speed. A hand grabbed her wrist. She gasped, struggling, until the king's scent cut through the air like lightning. "Enough!" Rowan's voice boomed through the corridor. In one swift motion, he pulled Elara behind him and slammed the attacker into the wall. The hood fell back, revealing a face Elara didn't expect. One of the palace healers, a woman named Sarah, pale and trembling. "Your Majesty, please," Sarah gasped. "You don't understand." Rowan's eyes glowed with fury. "Then explain before I let my wolf rip the truth from you." Sarah's lips trembled. "She's not supposed to be here," she said, pointing a shaking hand at Elara. "She was hidden for a reason. If she remembers who she really is, everything will fall apart. Your throne, your kingdom, you." Elara froze. "What are you talking about?" Sarah's eyes flicked toward her, full of sorrow. "You're not just a survivor of the Bloodfang raid, my lady," she whispered. "You're the reason it happened." The world seemed to stop. Rowan's hand fell to his side, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" But before Sarah could answer, a sharp whistle cut through the corridor, and a silver arrow struck her in the chest. She fell instantly, blood spreading across the floor as her body went limp. Elara screamed, the sound raw and filled with terror. Rowan turned, eyes blazing, scanning the shadows. But the assassin was gone. The guards rushed in too late. "Elara, stay with me," Rowan said, catching her trembling hands. She could barely speak. She said, "I'm the reason they attacked." Rowan looked at her, torn between disbelief and fury. "Don't listen to that. We'll find the truth." But deep inside, Elara already knew the truth wasn't far away. It had always been waiting, buried beneath 8 years of silence. And now, the silence was cracking. The moon hung high above the castle, bathing the marble halls in a silver glow. The night was still, yet everything inside Elara's chest thudded in chaos. She sat by the window of her new chamber, her fingers trembling as they traced the faint mark glowing on her wrist, the mark that appeared the moment the king had kissed her hand earlier that day. The Lycan King. The man she had feared for 8 years. The man she had avoided with silence and false muteness. Now he knew. She could still see the look in his eyes when he realized the truth. A blend of fury, confusion, and something far deeper. Desire. The heavy doors creaked open. "You shouldn't be awake," Elara froze. That voice, deep, calm, commanding, made her entire body shiver. She turned slowly, her heart hammering. King Kale stood in the doorway, wearing a simple black shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing the faint scar that ran across his collarbone. His golden eyes gleamed in the dim light like embers waiting to consume. "I can't sleep," she whispered. Her voice felt foreign after being silent for so long. He stepped closer, the air between them tightening. 8 years, he said quietly. "You lived under my roof pretending you couldn't speak. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Elara swallowed hard. You would have claimed me. The morning came softly, brushing the kingdom with golden light and the scent of fresh rain. But for Elara, the warmth of the sun could not chase away the chill of the night before. Her lips still tingled from where Kale's breath had ghosted over them. Her mark still glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The king knew. The entire palace would know soon enough. She sat at the edge of her bed, fingers curling around the edge of her cloak. The silence that had once protected her now felt like a noose. She wasn't just the mute servant anymore. She was the king's mate. A knock came at the door. Before she could answer, the maid, Isla, rushed in with wide eyes. Elara, you spoke yesterday. Elara froze. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the whole castle is talking. The king himself broke protocol and ordered no one to disturb you. Isla's voice trembled with excitement. Is it true? You're his? Elara's throat tightened. I don't know what I am anymore. Before Isla could respond, the horns outside blared. The royal summons. Kale was calling his council. Elara's pulse spiked. He'd said last night he wouldn't claim her. Not yet. But what if that had changed? In the throne room, the air was tense. Warriors, nobles, and advisors stood in uneasy silence as King Kale entered, his presence cutting through the air like a blade. His golden eyes flickered briefly toward Elara, who stood near the wall in her servant's cloak, trying to appear small, invisible, as she once had. But Kale's gaze found her anyway. Always. He ascended the dais and took his seat on the throne, draped in dark armor that reflected the morning light. 8 years, he began, his voice calm yet commanding. 8 years. One among us lived a lie. Whispers rippled through the hall. She's the one who never spoke, someone muttered. The mute girl. Kyle's stare silenced them all. Her name, he said, is Elara. Her breath caught, and she, Kyle continued, is not what she seems. The words sent a shiver through the crowd. The counselors exchanged alarmed glances. Elara could feel the weight of every eye on her, burning through her disguise. Kale stood slowly and descended the steps, each movement precise, deliberate. He stopped before her. Remove your hood, he commanded. Her hands trembled, but she obeyed. Her dark hair spilled free, the morning light catching the faint shimmer of her mark beneath her collarbone. Gasps filled the chamber. She bears the bond mark, one noble whispered. The king's mate, another breathed. Kale turned to face them, his tone hard. She was hidden under my protection. By fate or deception, she survived my curse longer than any before. And now, he looked back at Elara, his expression unreadable. We will see if destiny favors her still. A deep silence followed. Elara's eyes widened slightly. He's testing me. Kale turned to his general. From this day forward, Lady Elara will train with the royal guard. She will be tested in strength, loyalty, and truth. No one is to harm her, but no one will protect her either. The order struck the room like thunder. My king, protested an older advisor, to put your mate through trials is... Kale's gaze silenced him. It is necessary. His tone softened only slightly as he looked back at Elara. If she is to stand beside me, she must prove she can survive me. Her heart pounded. Fear and defiance warred inside her. She had spent years hiding from this man, and now she was being forced to stand before him, in front of everyone. But when their eyes met, she saw something flicker in his gaze. Not cruelty, not even anger, but belief that she might be the one who could finally break his curse. Elara lifted her chin, meeting his stare. Then I will survive, she said quietly. Kale's lips curved, the faintest hint of a dangerous smile. Good, let the trials begin. I should have, he said, voice sharp. You're my mate. I was only 16, she whispered. I wasn't ready. Kale's expression softened. For the first time, there was no dominance in his gaze, only pain. You were a terrified girl who thought silence could save her. I would never have forced you. Her eyes darted to him, uncertain. Then why do you hunt your mates, King Kale? Everyone says you destroy them. His jaw tensed. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkened forest. Because every woman I've ever cared for died because of me. My curse doesn't just kill love, it consumes it. Elara felt her breath hitch. A curse? He nodded slowly. A mark placed by the moon goddess herself. For every bond I accept, death follows. So I stopped claiming. I stopped feeling. His voice broke, barely above a whisper. Until you. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Elara's eyes burned. So you're saying I was right to hide? Cale turned to her, and in 2 strides he was close enough for her to feel his breath against her skin. No, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You were right to fear me, but you were wrong to think you could escape what we are. Her lips parted. Kyle, he cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing over her jaw. I've searched for peace in battles, in blood, in power, but it's only your silence that ever haunted me. Her throat tightened, tears threatening. You should hate me for lying. His mouth curved into something bittersweet. I did, until I realized your lie was the only thing that kept me alive this long. The world outside seemed to hold its breath as he leaned closer. His forehead rested against hers, their marks pulsing in unison. Soft, golden light merging between their skin. Fate didn't make a mistake, he murmured. You were hidden for a reason, her voice broke. And now that you've found me? He smiled faintly, his fangs glinting in the moonlight. Now, little wolf, I decide whether to claim you or let destiny tear us both apart. The courtyard of the royal fortress buzzed with tension. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of steel, sweat, and the damp moss of the ancient stones beneath Elara's boots. Warriors, Lycan elites, the king's chosen, stood in a semicircle around the training grounds, their expressions ranging from amusement to disdain. To them, she was the mute girl, the servant who had deceived their king. No one believed she belonged there, except Cale. He sat on the raised platform, flanked by his generals. His golden eyes burned with quiet command, his expression unreadable. Elara could feel his gaze like a brand on her skin. She hated that it made her heart race. The captain of the guard, a broad-shouldered Lycan named Draven, stepped forward with a smirk. Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly. Shall I go easy on the girl? Cale's voice was ice. Do so, and you'll find yourself fighting me next. The crowd stilled. Draven's smirk faded. He nodded once and turned to Elara. Then let's see what the king's little secret can do. Elara inhaled sharply. She'd trained in secret for years, mimicking the guards she watched from the shadows. But standing in the open, under the king's scrutiny, was a different kind of battle. The clang of metal rang out as Draven lunged. Elara barely dodged, her body moving on instinct. She rolled, grabbed a wooden staff from the rack, and blocked his next strike with surprising precision. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She twirled the staff, her stance low and balanced. Draven's attacks grew sharper, faster. He was testing her limits, his strikes fueled by the challenge of humiliating her. Each blow drove her back until her palms stung and her breath came ragged. Cale's gaze darkened from the platform. Yield, Draven snarled. You'll never survive among warriors. Elara's eyes blazed. Then maybe it's time you stop underestimating me. She pivoted sharply, using his momentum against him, and slammed the staff into his ribs. The impact echoed through the yard. Draven stumbled, shocked, before catching himself. The onlookers murmured in disbelief. Cale leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. There she is, he thought. The survivor who defied even fate. But Draven wasn't finished. He tossed aside his dulled blade and shifted, his bones cracking as his Lycan half surfaced. His eyes glowed amber, and claws extended. The spectators gasped. He's shifting. Against a human, Cale stood abruptly. Draven! But before he could command, Draven lunged. Elara's world slowed. Her instincts screamed as she dodged, barely avoiding his claws. The staff splintered under his swipe, sending her stumbling backward. Then something inside her snapped, her vision blurred with light, silver, wild, primal. The faint mark on her collarbone burned, spreading warmth through every vein. Her pupils thinned, and a faint shimmer of fur brushed her skin before vanishing again. The crowd fell silent. Draven froze mid-attack, confusion flickering across his face. What are you? Elara straightened, breathing hard, the broken staff still clutched in her hands. I'm not just your king's mate, she said, voice low, fierce. I'm the reason he's still alive. Kale's heart stopped. The mark on his wrist pulsed in response to hers, glowing faintly. It had never done that before, not with any of his former mates. Enough, Kale commanded, his voice reverberating with alpha authority. The energy in the air instantly stilled. Draven bowed his head, chest heaving. My apologies, Your Majesty. Kyle ignored him. His gaze locked on Elara, who stood trembling but defiant. Take her to the healer, he ordered, and no one will speak of what they saw today. As the guards escorted her out, Kale remained frozen on the dais, his mind whirling. That power. It wasn't ordinary, it was ancient, forbidden. The last time he'd seen energy like that, it had come from the one creature the moon goddess herself had hidden from the Lycans centuries ago, the Silent Wolf. And now, she was standing in his palace. The flames in the grand hearth roared, throwing gold and crimson shadows across the war room. But Kale felt nothing but cold. He paced before the ancient marble table, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The memory of the training ground replayed in his mind again and again, Elara standing amid the dust and ruin, her eyes glowing like liquid silver, the mark on her collarbone burning through her skin like moonfire. The Silent Wolf. The name had haunted Lycan legends for centuries. A myth, a whisper of a wolf so powerful the goddess herself silenced her to protect the world from her voice. And yet, that same impossible magic had just flared from his mate. The doors creaked open. The high priestess entered in her flowing white robes, the scent of sage and moon petals filling the chamber. Her pale eyes flickered with curiosity as she bowed deeply. You summoned me, my king? Kale turned sharply. You knew. The woman's calm expression barely faltered. Knew what, Majesty? He slammed his palm against the table, making the flames flicker. Don't play games with me, Lyriel. You knew she wasn't an ordinary wolf. You hid her in my castle for 8 years. Lyriel's voice remained composed. I protected her, as I was instructed. By whom? The moon goddess, she whispered. The room fell into suffocating silence. Kyle stared at her, his chest tightening. Explain. Lyriel stepped closer, her eyes glinting with divine certainty. Long before your curse, the moon goddess foresaw the rise of darkness within the Lycan bloodline, your bloodline. She created one wolf with the power to break it, but that wolf was too powerful, too wild. So she bound her voice and hid her among mortals until the destined mate found her. Kale's heartbeat thundered in his ears. And that's Elara. The priestess nodded slowly. The Silent Wolf. He took a step back, the weight of it all pressing down on his chest. She's the reason I've survived the curse this long. Yes, Lyriel said softly. Her silence shielded you. As long as she remained unclaimed, the curse could not devour you. But now that she's awakened, she met his gaze. Both your lives hang by the same thread. Kale's fists clenched. Then I should never have touched her. The bond was inevitable, Lyriel said. You cannot fight what was written in the stars. The curse and the gift are entwined, my king. To claim her fully may destroy you both, or set you free. Kale's eyes darkened, his inner Lycan stirring restlessly beneath his skin. So what am I supposed to do? Watch her burn because of me? The priestess stepped closer, her voice turning grave. No, Majesty. You must train her. The power inside her is raw and dangerous. If she doesn't learn to control it, it will consume her before the next full moon. Kale's eyes widened. The next full moon is in 3 nights. Lyriel bowed her head. Then you have little time, my king. She must awaken her full strength, or both of you will perish. Kyle's jaw tightened. He turned toward the window, watching lightning flicker in the distance. She lied to me for 8 years, he said quietly. But I can't hate her. Not anymore. Lyriel's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. Perhaps that's what the goddess intended. Love born not of power, but of patience. Kale's gaze hardened, his voice low. Then I'll make her strong enough to survive me. He turned, the firelight reflecting off his golden eyes. Send word to the training yard. At dawn, Elara begins her true trials. Not as a servant, not as a girl pretending to be mute, but as my fated queen. The dawn came cold and cruel. Mist clung to the castle walls like ghosts, and the courtyard lay empty, except for one figure waiting by the training grounds. King Kale. Elara hesitated at the edge of the field, her breath fogging in the air. Her body still ached from the fight with Draven. Every step reminded her of the bruises she'd earned, the humiliation she'd endured. But that wasn't what scared her. What scared her was him. Kyle stood with his back to her, dressed in dark training leathers. He wasn't wearing his crown or armor, just a sword strapped across his back and the quiet authority that clung to him like a second skin. He turned when she approached, and his gaze caught her like a snare. "You're late." "I didn't know the king trained at sunrise," she said carefully, trying to keep her tone neutral. His lips curved faintly. "The king doesn't, but your mate does." The word mate rolled off his tongue with a dangerous softness that made her stomach twist. Elara lifted her chin. "If this is punishment for lying to you..." "It's not punishment," he cut in, stepping closer. "It's survival training. You'll learn to control what you awakened yesterday, or it'll kill you." Her heart stumbled. "What I awakened?" Kale's eyes darkened. "You think I didn't notice the power in you, little wolf? That silver light wasn't human, or ordinary." He stepped around her slowly, his presence like fire and command. "Tell me, did you feel it burn?" She swallowed. "Yes, good," he said. "Then we start with control." He tossed a short sword toward her. She caught it clumsily, the weight of it unfamiliar. Kale raised his own blade. "Defend!" She barely had time to react before he lunged. Their blades clashed with a sharp clang, the vibration running up her arm. His attacks were fast, precise, not meant to hurt her, but to push her to her limits. "Focus," he barked. "You're thinking too much." "I'm trying. Don't try. Feel." She gritted her teeth, moving to block another strike. Their movements fell into a rhythm, his dominance meeting her growing defiance. Sweat slicked her skin, her breaths coming harder, faster. Kale circled her, every inch of him raw power and control. "You've hidden too long behind silence, Elara. Use your voice." She blinked, confused. "What?" He struck again, harder this time. The force sent her stumbling back. "Scream," he growled. "Let it out. The power in you is bound by fear." Her heart thundered. Memories surged, the nights she stayed mute to avoid being found, the pain of biting her own tongue when she wanted to cry out. Kyle swung again, and instinct took over. She raised her blade and shouted. The sound ripped through the air, wild and fierce. The moment her voice broke free, a wave of silver energy exploded from her body, knocking Kale several feet back. The ground cracked beneath her feet. The courtyard fell still. Elara's chest heaved, her eyes wide with shock. Kale stood slowly, brushing dust from his shoulder, his lips curling into the faintest smirk. "There she is." Her knees almost gave out. "What was that?" "Your true strength," he said, stepping closer. His tone softened. "The silent wolf's voice isn't silence, it's control. You were never cursed to be mute, Elara. You were protecting the world from what your voice can do." Her hand trembled. "And now?" Kale stopped inches from her, his breath mingling with hers. "Now you'll learn to use it. Because if you don't," his eyes gleamed gold, "the curse will devour us both." For a long moment neither moved. Her pulse matched the steady thrum of his heartbeat, the mark on her collarbone glowing faintly in sync with his. She looked up, voice trembling. "You're not afraid of me?" Kale's gaze softened just enough to make her chest ache. "I'm afraid of losing you." The admission hit her harder than any strike. Before she could reply, a horn sounded in the distance. 3 sharp blasts that made Kale's head snap toward the gates. An alarm. His expression hardened instantly. "Get back inside now. What's happening?" "Attackers," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "The palace is under siege." Elara's breath caught. "The curse, not now." Kale unsheathed his blade, golden light flashing across his eyes as he shifted. "Stay behind me." But Elara felt the power stir again, pulsing like fire under her skin. She could sense something coming. Something dark. And this time, she knew she couldn't hide from it. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The alarm bells screamed through the palace corridors, echoing off the stone like the howl of a beast. Outside, chaos erupted, warriors shouting, steel clashing, flames rising beyond the walls of Moonfall Keep. Elara followed Kyle out into the courtyard, her heart pounding. The once tranquil training ground now blazed with fire and blood. A dozen dark-cloaked figures breached the gates, moving unnaturally fast. Their eyes glowed crimson, not wolves, not Lycans. Something else, something cursed. Shadowborn, Kale muttered, his golden eyes igniting as he drew his blade. "They're after you," her pulse spiked. "Me?" "Yes," he said grimly. "They can smell the silent wolf's awakening." Before she could respond, a Shadowborn leaped from the flames, claws slashing. Kale moved with terrifying grace, cutting it down midair. Another lunged from behind and Kale spun, growling, "Elara, move!" She ducked, rolled, and snatched a fallen sword from the ground. Her body moved faster than her mind, instinct taking over. When the next creature charged, she swung, and silver light burst from her blade, slicing through it like sunlight cutting shadow. The creature disintegrated with a shriek. Elara froze, breath ragged. "What did I just—" Kale's shout broke through her thoughts. "Stay with me." He fought like a storm unleashed, every swing precise, every strike fatal. But even he was outnumbered. More Shadowborn poured through the gates, their shrieks splitting the air. The scent of blood filled her lungs. Warriors fell around her. Kale caught her wrist, yanking her against his chest, just as a blast of dark magic slammed into the ground beside them, sending debris flying. He shielded her with his body, growling low, "They're using witchcraft." From the smoke ahead, a voice called, smooth, mocking, and cold. "Well, well." The cursed king and his little liar. Kale's body went rigid. Elara followed his gaze to the tall figure emerging from the haze, a man draped in black, his silver eyes glinting with malice. "Lucien," Kyle hissed. The intruder smirked. "You remember me, old friend," Elara's blood chilled. "Friend?" Lucien stepped forward, his aura dark and powerful. "You should have let her stay hidden, Kyle. The moon goddess made her for one purpose, to end your line." "That's a lie," Elara shouted. Lucien's gaze flicked to her, amused. "You don't even know what you are, do you, little wolf? You think your silence was mercy? It was containment," Kale growled, stepping protectively in front of her. "You won't touch her." Lucien's smile widened. "I don't need to. Her power will destroy you on its own." He raised his hand, and darkness surged toward them like a living wave. Kale grabbed Elara, pulling her close. "Use it!" He shouted over the roar. She shook her head. "I can't." "Yes, you can." His eyes burned gold. "You're the only one who can stop this." The darkness rushed closer, devouring light, air, sound, everything. Desperation clawed at her chest. Her instincts screamed, and then she screamed. The sound tore through the night, fierce, raw, and filled with power. A shockwave of silver light exploded from her body, consuming the darkness, hurling Lucien and his army backward. The force cracked the very stones beneath them. Silence followed, smoke cleared. Shadowborn corpses turned to ash. Only Kale and Elara stood in the center of the ruined courtyard, their bond marks burning like twin suns. Kale dropped to one knee, clutching his chest, his breath ragged. "Elara, stop. You'll burn yourself out." Her voice trembled. "I can't." He grabbed her face, forcing her eyes to meet his. "Listen to me. You're not alone in this. Breathe. With me." His voice grounded her. Slowly, the wild power dimmed, fading into a soft glow. She collapsed against him, trembling. Kyle caught her, holding her close as he glared toward the smoking gate. But Lucien was gone, vanished into the night. Only his echo lingered. The silent wolf cannot be tamed. She can only choose whom she destroys. Elara buried her face against Kale's chest, shaking. "He's coming back, isn't he?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Yes. And next time, he won't come alone." He looked down at her, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. "You just saved us all, Elara, but you also told the world what you are." Her eyes lifted to his, glowing faintly silver. "Then it's too late to hide." Kale's thumb brushed her cheek, his voice low and fierce. "Then we don't hide. We fight! The night was quiet, the kind of silence that carried both peace and dread. The moon hung low, bathing the castle courtyard in silver light. Elara stood beneath it, her fingers tracing the cool stone of the old fountain, the weight of unspoken words pressing heavily against her heart. 8 years of pretending, 8 years of silence. And now, the truth was clawing to be set free. The king's footsteps echoed behind her, steady and purposeful. She didn't need to turn and she could feel him. His presence was like the moon's pull on the tide, impossible to ignore, overwhelming in its gravity. Elara. His voice was deep, threaded with something raw. You've been avoiding me since the trial. She didn't respond. Not yet. The night breeze lifted her hair, brushing against her scarred neck, a mark that told 1,000 lies. He came closer, his boots crunching over gravel until he was standing just behind her. You can't hide from me, he said quietly. Not anymore. Elara's throat tightened. Not anymore. The words pierced her like a blade. She turned to face him, her eyes catching the glint of the moonlight in his silver irises. He looked tired, not in body, but in spirit. A man haunted by duty, fate, and now, by her. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered finally. The words came out brittle, like a confession carried by the wind. His jaw clenched. By lying? By surviving, she corrected, her voice trembling. If I had spoken, if I had let you hear me 8 years ago, I would have been claimed before I was ready. I would have been nothing more than your fate, not your choice. The king's expression softened, conflict flickering behind his eyes. And now? What am I to you now, Elara? She took a step forward. Her heart thundered painfully, every beat echoing years of fear and longing. You're the man who looked at me and didn't see a curse. You saw a woman, but that doesn't erase what I've done. He reached for her then, his hand hesitating just inches from her cheek. You think I care about your silence? About the years you hid from me? His voice broke slightly. Do you know what those years did to me, Elara? I thought I was going mad. My wolf restless, always searching, never finding. And all this time, you were right here. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. I wasn't ready to be someone's destiny. I didn't want to be the reason a king lost control of his beast. He moved closer, the air between them growing thick with tension and something dangerously tender. You never made me lose control, he murmured. You made me human again. Her lips parted, a shiver running down her spine. And what happens now? She asked softly. The king's eyes darkened, his wolf stirring behind them. Now, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You stop running from me. For a moment, the world seemed to still. No sound but the whisper of the wind and the pounding of their hearts. Then his hand cupped her jaw gently, his thumb tracing the curve of her lip. Elara trembled. She wanted to pull away, to keep her distance, but her body betrayed her. For once, she didn't silence her heart. I don't know how to be what you need, she whispered. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. You already are. The confession stole the breath from her lungs. The tension that had been building between them for years finally cracked, melting into something fragile yet fierce. And beneath the pale moon, with the night as their witness, Elara allowed herself to feel what she had denied for so long. The bond, the love, the truth. Her silence had protected her once, but tonight it no longer had to. Morning came draped in gold and tension. The palace buzzed with unease. Whispers slithered through corridors, and the scent of doubt lingered in the air. Everyone had felt the shift last night, the invisible pulse that rippled through the bond between the king and Elara. Elara stood before her mirror, her hands trembling as the maids fastened the soft silver gown around her shoulders. It shimmered faintly in the sunlight, just like moonlight caught in fabric, a gown fit for a queen. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to wear that title. Her heart pounded in her chest. He was going to announce it, publicly. Before the council, the nobles, and every pack represented in the kingdom. The truth she had hidden for 8 years would no longer be hers alone. A gentle knock sounded at her chamber door. Come in, she whispered. It opened, and there he stood, the Lycan King. His presence filled the room instantly, powerful yet achingly calm. He wore his ceremonial armor, a black coat embroidered with gold sigils of his house, and a crown glinting like captured sunlight. Elara. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened between them. Are you ready? She looked down at her hands. I don't think I ever will be, she admitted. Once you say it, there's no going back. He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. Do you want me to keep it secret? Her breath hitched. The temptation was there, to stay hidden, to avoid the storm that would follow. But she had been silent too long. No, she whispered, lifting her gaze. If the world is going to hate me, let them hate me for the truth, not the lie. A faint smile tugged at his lips. There's the wolf I've been waiting for. He offered his arm, and though fear still gnawed at her chest, she took it. Together, they walked down the grand hall, where the doors to the throne chamber stood open, revealing a sea of faces, nobles, generals, and elders from every major pack. The murmurs began the moment they stepped in. Is that her? The mute servant? She can't be the fated one. The king's aura silenced them before a single insult could finish. His wolf energy radiated like fire, commanding submission from everyone in the hall. He led Elara to the dais, standing tall before the gathered court. I summoned you here today, he began, his voice deep and resonant. Not for council matters, but for truth. The crowd fell still. For years, you have watched your king fight the beast within him, he continued. You have watched me rule in strength, but also in solitude. The reason is simple. My mate was hidden from me, my fated bond, silenced and suppressed by fear. Gasps rippled through the hall. Elara's pulse thundered in her ears. He turned toward her then, his voice softening just enough for her to hear. Until now. Then, in one sweeping motion, he took her hand and turned her to face the assembly. This woman, he declared, his voice carrying through the hall like thunder, is my true mate. The moons chosen for the king of Lycans, Elara of the Silver Creek Pack. The hall erupted. Some bowed in shock, others protested loudly. A few wolves even growled in disbelief. She deceived the court, one councilman shouted. She hid her voice to manipulate the bond. The king's growl shook the pillars. Silence. The force of his power made the man stumble backward. You will speak with respect to your Luna. Elara's breath caught. Luna. He said it before everyone. The title felt foreign and sacred on his tongue. Still, the murmurs persisted, rebellion, envy, and confusion spreading like wildfire. But when Elara stepped forward, all eyes turned to her. I never sought this, she said, her voice trembling but clear. I hid because I was afraid of being nothing more than fate's tool. But I see now that silence changes nothing. The truth finds its way through every wall. Her gaze swept the crowd, some still hostile, others stunned. I am not here to take your power. I am here to bring balance to it. The king's beast is my burden too. The hall fell into stunned quiet. Even the most skeptical wolves lowered their heads, sensing the ancient power that hummed faintly in her words, the power that had been dormant for years. The king turned to her, pride gleaming in his eyes. You are stronger than you think. But even as the crowd began to kneel, Elara caught something in the corner of her vision. A shadow slipping out of the hall, cloaked and swift. A messenger from one of the rival packs, perhaps, or worse. Her instincts screamed danger. The king leaned close, sensing her tension. What is it? She whispered. Someone doesn't want this union to last. His jaw tightened. Then let them come, he murmured darkly. They'll learn what happens when you threaten a Lycan King and his mate. The grand hall glowed with hundreds of flickering candles, their light dancing across gold banners and crystal goblets. Laughter and the sound of music echoed off the high ceilings, masking the tension that lingered just beneath the surface. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, the official coronation of the new Luna, the king's long-lost fated mate. But beneath the smiles and formal bows, unease rippled through the air like a hidden storm. Elara sat beside the Lycan King at the high table, her silver gown gleaming beneath the chandeliers. Every eye seemed fixed on her, some filled with awe, others with disdain. She could feel the weight of their stares like invisible daggers. The title Luna still felt foreign on her tongue, and though the crown resting lightly on her hair shimmered beautifully, it carried the heaviness of 1,000 expectations. Her fingers curled slightly against the tablecloth. "They don't accept me," she murmured under her breath. The king leaned closer, his deep voice low but reassuring. "They will," he said, his gaze sweeping over the hall. "In time they'll kneel not out of fear, but respect." She wanted to believe him, but something in her chest felt uneasy, a subtle chill, like a premonition. At the far end of the room, a servant entered quietly, carrying a silver tray of wine. His movements were careful, too careful, his eyes darting nervously toward the dais where the royal pair sat. Elara noticed. She always noticed what others tried to hide. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, her instincts sharpening. Something's wrong. As the servant approached, her heart began to race. The scent was off, faintly metallic beneath the sweet aroma of wine. "Wait," she said softly. The king turned to her, brows furrowing. "Elara?" She stood abruptly. "Don't drink that," she said, her voice slicing through the hall. All chatter ceased. The servant froze mid-step, eyes wide. The king's soldiers instantly moved forward, but the man was faster than any human should be. With a flick of his wrist, the tray clattered to the ground, revealing a blade hidden beneath the folds of his sleeve. The hall erupted into chaos. He lunged straight for the king. Elara didn't think. She moved. Her wolf surged, her instincts taking over as she stepped in front of him. The blade slashed across her arm, but before the man could strike again, a burst of silver light exploded from her palms, flinging him backward. Gasps filled the room. Her breath hitched, her hands trembling as the energy hummed around her. Wild, ancient, and alive. The assassin hit the wall hard, pinned by an invisible force that shimmered like moonlight. His eyes widened in terror. You're not supposed to exist." Elara's voice came out low and cold. "Then you should have stayed in the shadows." The king's guards rushed forward, disarming the attacker. But all eyes were now on her. The light faded slowly from her skin, leaving a faint silver glow in her eyes. The king turned toward her, both astonished and concerned. "Elara, what was that?" She stared at her hands, shaking. I don't know, but she did. Somewhere deep within, she had always known. The whispers began immediately. The moon's chosen. The old prophecy. Could she be? The council members exchanged panicked looks. One of them, Elder Thorn, rose from his seat, pointing at her. "You bring doom upon us." The ancient scrolls spoke of this power, the voice and light of the silent wolf. She was meant to be sealed, not crowned. The king's growl silenced him instantly. "Watch your tongue, Thorn. She just saved your life." But the elder's words had already done their damage. Fear flickered across the faces in the hall. The prophecy wasn't new. Stories of a wolf with the voice of the moon and the power of the stars, destined to either save or destroy the Lycan bloodline. And now, she stood before them. Elara's vision swam slightly. The magic had drained her strength. The king caught her as her knees buckled. "Easy," he murmured, holding her against his chest. "You're safe now." She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll come for me." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his gaze dark and fierce. "Then they'll have to get through me first." Around them, the soldiers dragged the assassin away, but his dying words echoed across the silent hall. "The moon has chosen, and now the shadows will rise." The king's eyes met Elara's, and for the first time, she saw it there too. Not just love, but fear, because whatever she was, the world had been waiting for her to awaken. And now that she had, there would be no turning back. The castle's war room was shrouded in unease. Scrolls lay scattered across the massive table, some so ancient their edges crumbled at the touch. The king stood at the head, his hands braced against the wood as the council whispered in fear. Elara sat quietly in the corner, her arm bandaged, her body still weak from the magic she'd unleashed at the feast. The wound had healed faster than it should have. Another sign she wasn't just a wolf anymore. The king's voice broke through the silence. "Speak, Thorn. You said you've read this prophecy before." The old councilman hesitated, his gaze flickering nervously toward Elara. "It was forbidden for a reason. My king, the silent wolf is not a savior. She's a weapon forged by the moon goddess herself, born once in 1,000 years, destined to either save the Lycan bloodline or end it." The room darkened as clouds veiled the morning sun. Elara's pulse quickened. "And how do we know which fate I bring?" Thorn swallowed hard. "That depends on her choice. The silent wolf carries the song of the moon, a power that can call or destroy the spirits of Lycans. If her heart turns to vengeance, the bond between wolves will shatter. If she loves, truly loves, she will restore the balance that was lost." The king turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You're saying her emotions decide the fate of us all." "Exactly," Thorn said, "which is why she must be contained." Before anyone could move, the king's aura flared, raw, dominant, deadly. "You will not touch her." The council shrank back. Elara's breath trembled as she met the king's eyes. "You can't protect me from destiny." "I can try," he said softly. "Because you're not a prophecy to me, Elara. You're my mate." Her throat tightened. For years, she had hidden her voice to escape being claimed, and now, the very bond she had feared was the only thing anchoring her to herself. But deep inside, she felt it. A calling, ancient and cold. Something beyond her control was awakening, and the shadows outside the kingdom were stirring with it. As the council dispersed, Elara looked out the window at the rising storm clouds. "They're coming," she whispered. The king joined her, his gaze following hers. "Then let them come. This time we fight together." And somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl echoed, long, mournful, and full of promise. The beginning of war. The kingdom burned. Smoke rolled over the hills as enemy forces gathered under a blood-red moon. The air reeked of iron and fury. The rogue packs, led by those who feared the silent wolf's awakening, had united under one banner. Destroy the Luna before she destroys us all. Elara stood atop the fortress wall, the wind whipping through her hair, the silver glow in her eyes brightening with each passing second. She could feel the hum of power in her veins, the moon's song calling her to act. Behind her, the king approached, his armor dark with battle marks. "If you step onto that field, they'll see what you are," he warned. "They already know," she said, her voice calm, too calm. "But they'll also see what I'm capable of." He reached out, gripping her hand. "If you use too much of your power, it could consume you. You're not meant to bear it alone." She smiled faintly, sadness in her eyes. "Then don't let me do it alone." And with that, she leapt from the wall. The battlefield erupted as she landed, her aura bursting outward like a storm. Wolves froze mid-charge, their instincts screaming submission. The air shimmered around her as silvery energy flowed from her palms, cutting through darkness like moonlight through fog. The king followed, his beast unleashed, massive, black and radiant with royal power. Together they fought as one, the silent wolf and the Lycan King, fate's final song. But even as they turned the tide, the leader of the rogue pack, a massive dark wolf with crimson eyes, emerged from the chaos. He lunged, fangs bared for the king's throat. Elara screamed, the sound splitting the air like thunder. Her voice, the one she'd hidden for 8 years, carried power, pure, divine, unstoppable. Wolves fell to their knees. The enemy leader howled in agony as the light tore through him, dissolving his darkness into ash. And then, silence. Every creature on the battlefield bowed their heads. The moon glowed brighter than it ever had, casting light over Elara's trembling form. The king caught her as she collapsed, her magic spent, her body limp. "Elara, stay with me," he pleaded. Her eyes fluttered open. "Did we win?" He nodded, his throat tight. "You did." A small smile curved her lips. Then it was worth it. Her eyes closed, her pulse fading. The glow around her dimmed until it was gone. And in that moment, the Lycan King, feared by all, fell to his knees, cradling the woman who had saved them. Days passed. The fires died. The kingdom mourned. The silent wolf, savior and queen, lay in the royal crypt beneath the castle, wrapped in moonlit silk. Every night, the king visited her tomb, speaking words she could no longer hear. But on the 7th night, the moon turned full again. And something changed. A soft hum filled the air, low and melodic. The song of the moon. It echoed faintly through the stone halls, reaching the king as he knelt beside her still form. "Elara?" he whispered, his heart thundering. A faint light began to glow around her, soft and pulsing. Her fingers twitched. Her chest rose in a shallow breath. He froze, afraid to believe it, afraid to hope. But then her eyes opened, glowing silver once more. "You didn't think the moon goddess would let me rest while you still needed me, did you?" she murmured weakly, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Tears glistened in his eyes as he gathered her into his arms. "You came back," her gaze softened. "I told you, silence protected me once, but now, my voice belongs to you." Above them, the moon shone brighter, its light spilling through the windows like a blessing. The wolves outside lifted their heads and howled, not in mourning, but in triumph. The silent wolf had returned. The prophecy fulfilled, not as a weapon, not as a curse, but as the Luna who loved her king enough to rewrite destiny itself. And as he kissed her beneath the glow of their goddess, the world knew peace for the first time in centuries.